Right, good morning. This is a joint paper, and I'm Paul Reilly, and Ian Dawson's a colleague of mine at the Winchester School of Art. We're both at University of Southampton. He is a sculptor, and his practice is in plastic, and both of us are technology-based. So the story behind this is, pardon the pretentious title, this is actually part of a summary of a chapter in a book about robot vision, where it will be published in Edinburgh University Press in January. And let me just explain some of the terms to begin with. So metalithic is, we're going to go beyond alithic. And the postcards is a reference to the two of us being isolated early on in the pandemic, not being able to work together. And we were sending our metaliths backwards and forwards, both across the web and using Royal Mail. So that's you'll see it in a minute. So we practice what we now call virtual art archaeology. So in 1991, or 1990 actually, I presented towards a virtual archaeology at CAA in Southampton. So I claimed title to that and changed the title. More recently, Doug Bailey in University of San Francisco, he's introduced, no, let me go back one step. The point of virtual archaeology was to question how we did archaeology. Now, nowadays, it's mostly about reconstructions and fly-throughs of cathedrals and all that kind of stuff. But it was meant to be questioning what we did, how we did it, and why we did it, and could we do something different? So that was what it's supposed to be. Doug Bailey has this thing called art archaeology, and it's not art and archaeology or archaeology with art or those things. It is using the approach of artists to look at how we work. So it's a kind of archaeology of practices. And the thing about we work with artists is they are very subversive and they like to break things. So virtual archaeology is taking those two things together and say, how do we break things in the digital? So this is meant to be disruptive. So what's behind this is we want to break away from the genealogies of looking. So when you look at images today, they're always composed in a particular way. You look at any archaeological folk, it's got the ranging rod, it's got the pole, it's framed this way, the scale, etc. And you don't really think about it. So as Gavin Lucas says here, is you compose the image and press the button. Job done. But media theorists have a different view of this. So Wilhelm Flusser, who's actually writing in the 70s, he says, we've changed people into functionaries. Because they no longer think, they're not questioning, they're not criticizing the approach. And Sean Kubert, who's writing much more recently, he's gone further to say, we are enslaved. We're no longer thinking about what these images, these processes we're using are doing. So what I'm going to show you is 12 postcards which have extreme phygital skeuomorphs. So I have to introduce the word phygital. So phygital is digital and physical. So the objects we're going to show you metamorphose between digital and back to physical and so on. And this is quite hard to gather, so you can put your hand up and say, stop, explain that. So this is the first postcard. The postcards are structured in this way: a title, a quote, and an image. There's 12 of them. And this one says, form is henceforth divorced from matter. In fact, matter as a visible object is of no great use any longer, except as the mold on which form is shaped. Give us a few negatives of a thing worth seeing, taken from different points of view, and that's all we want of it. And that was written by Holmes in 1859. And we still behave like that. We think we document things in this way. In this case, I have taken, sorry, I need to go back. Back. Right. This is the object we're going to talk about. I found this in a lockout walking around the field in Hampshire. It's a lithic, and it's in a cornfield. And the point behind this slide was to show how hard it is to find these things if you were a robot, in fact. But keep it in mind, it's a lithic and it's in a cornfield. Then there's my little thing about structure from motion. The first thing I did when I found this was tell Ian about it, and he's in a studio in southwest London. And he goes, what is it? How big is it? Where did you find it? Etc., etc. So I went out to the backyard, got my cruddy ladder, blue tack, put the axe on top of it, and I walked around and took photographs. It's not meant to be an ideal version of it, but it was just enough for me to send it to Ian. Okay? But this idea that you could capture the shape of it, I want to question that. Then I did another piece which says, this is an RTI, reflectance transformation image. We often use it. Basically, for those who are not familiar with the technique, you have a static object, a static camera, and you take lots and lots of photographs, and what you're doing is you move the light source around to create shadows. And then this is a frame of an interactive feedback. And those shadows are crucially important because they're a diffraction pattern. So they represent temporal ripples, because those photographs are taken at different times. They're only slightly different times and slightly different angles, but it's not a photograph. It looks like a photograph, but it's not a photograph. And I can show it's not a photograph because when I use the RTI viewers, it behaves like a spreadsheet. So this quote here from John May, photographs never intrinsically calculable remain thoroughly visual. Images structurally calculable are only apparently visual. So I've actually taken a whole series of views of the axe from the RTI, and I've used it to find out different areas. So at the bottom there, you see the glossy bulb of percussion, for instance, and I've used specular enhancement. The patina on there's other things I've been using. So I'm having to apply a multitude of different imaging techniques on the one axe. And I have to make the decision which filter functions for which part of the axe I'm applying. So already it's a hugely complicated set of decisions that have to be made if you were a robot, for instance. So then I thought, right, his other question was, what's it made out of? And it's made of silica. And I've recorded it using silicon. So what I've done here with my spreadsheet, what formerly was called a photograph, is I've told an AI program that it's looking for an etching of silicon, Lumansky chroma etching of silica wafers. So it's the chip of a computer. And I've told it, but I give it the picture of the axe and said, find the silica X. So what you've got is an image of the axe, which has the structure of silicon mapped onto it. So you've got microscopic detail mapped onto the axe, just to bend your head. So at this point, we say, we're starting to get a bit further away from the axe, and we need to go back and look at how we grasp the objects beside photographs. And in this one, we are using a scanner, a Creo Exascan, to start looking at it in a slightly different way. And both these techniques will allow us to skin the object. What I'm trying to get across here is Lucretius in the classics describes vision as touching things and pulling the skins off. You have a membrane. And that's what we're producing with these cameras as surfaces today. So these digital models we're producing have no thickness and have no inside. So I've now gone, although it's supposed to be metalithic, it's quite not lithic at all. It's only a figment on the screen. So at this point, we were saying, how do we put the matter back into the lithic? So we used Ian. Ian's the sculptor, and we're both interested in 3D printing. And we used the structure from information from the previous slide to create 3D printed models. Now, at this point, Ian has not actually met the axe, and he's an artist, so he's printed them all in these dazzling displays of color. And he doesn't know what size it is, so they're all at different sizes. I actually found quite a lot of these axes. I had a lot of spare time in the lockdowns, but this is just a couple of them, and I'm talking about one in particular. So he decides to 3D print them, and because he's bored, halfway through it, he just pulls the wire out and puts a different color in, and we get this amazing objects, you know, really, really strange skeuomorphs. And so they've arrived at his desk through the internet, 3D printers, and then he posts them back to me using Royal Mail. So I get the stones back as corn. These are polylactic acid, which is corn-based starch. You get the thing about the cornfield at the beginning. And then I reintroduce them as a guerrilla art installation back on the fields where I found them. It's a guerrilla installation because it's National Trust property and I didn't ask him for permission. So that's the stone here. Now it's this polychromatic gem. The real axe is still there to give you an idea of the scale, and I've got a color scale in the thing. So in this quote, the assumed distinction between visible and invisible needs to be replaced with studying the ways of generating eccentric configurations, visibilities simultaneously with anesthetic fields of invisibility. So this is a kind of confabulation. These pictures I've been shown I've taken something, asked it to look at something different, and we put it back to make you think differently about it, what it was. The purpose of this is, I showed you the field before, it's on a public footpath. The average person would never find that metallith. You wouldn't see it. It's miles and miles, and I'm an archaeologist, and I'm bored stiff, and so I find it. But to make it visible, we put it back this way, so it's in the same spot. I recorded the 3 words, the location where I found these things, and then I went back and put these other ones, and people go along and say, what is that? How did it get there? What's it made of? Exactly the sort of questions that we should be asking when we find these things. So that's the confabulation going on in this guerrilla piece of work. So then, the other question was, where did you find it? So what I've done here is I've gone back to the style transfer, and I've told the artificial intelligence, this deeply convolved neural network, to look at the axe picture right at the beginning I showed you with the shadows, and look for the fields in which it's found from a Google map. So this is a map which shows the fields in which the metallith was found. So it gives you a completely different perspective on place and location. It's one you can't see, it's theorized, but it makes you stop and think. So I can tell you now that the axe was found in the southern downs of Hampshire, and that will give you an indication of what it looks like. But now I've got macro scale onto medium scale, which before we had micro scale on the medium scale. You can see I'm obviously having quite a lot of fun at this point. So then we took this thing a bit further, and here's another version of this metallith. And what we've done here is that RTI again. So we've now, I'll be finished. We've now gone through full cycle. So the axe is now on a plinth, and we've got the RTI going, the multiple photographs, the light sources moving around. But in this, I've actually got Ian is in the photograph. And if I do it interactively, these ghosts are of him doing the work. So we've put the functionary and the process of making is in the image. And we've gone through 2 iterations now. We've now got physical material loops, strange loops of... So to bring it back to the robotic view and how we deal with it, this picture tries to bring all those ideas together. So here am I in my studio in Hampshire. Ian's arm is holding one of these statues in his studio in London. We are using a ball in the back of the window as the reference point for the globe, and the flash is showing the camera. So the image, the mise en abîme, is the images are bouncing backwards and forwards across the internet. And both us, as I'm taking the photographs and he's moving it around. So both the making processes have been moved into a performative state. So what we're trying to say here is the process of making our records is just as important as the records are. So, conclusions. Images are never innocent. They come with genealogies of presenting and looking born within old technologies. So those old pictures take us back to photographs which were in the 1840s. Genealogies of looking need not be fossilized as skeuomorphic archaeological processes in modern technology, which offer many more useful and enlightening affordances of inquiry, representation, or misrepresentation. They can stimulate an inquiring mind. Please reject the role of mere functionary, the slave to technology who just presses the button and walks away, like the writer who writes for his pen. We're thinking people. We should be thinking of ways to make other people think about what we do and how we do it. Make the pluritemporal makers visible. These things are not static moments in time. And finally, the reason we do it, if we continue to think of images as simply more efficient drawing or technical enhancements of otherwise undisturbed orthographic life, we will continue to drift in an ocean of simulations for which we have no compass or concepts.